Have you ever woken up one morning and felt that your entire life had been reduced to the sound of silence I have? And at 77, silence can be both a comfort and a curse. My name is Walter Grayson. I live alone in Fargo, North Dakota. 5 years ago, my wife Marjorie passed away, and ever since the house has felt like a museum, every corner filled with her memory, every object holding the echo of her touch. That morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains with a pale, forgiving glow. I sat up slowly, feeling my joints complain, and shuffled to the kitchen. Same routine as always, oatmeal, half an apple, and tea. Marjorie used to joke that I was so predictable it hurt. But after she died, I kept that routine because it felt like the only thread tying me to the life we once had. I'd spent decades working for Prairie Mutual Insurance. Not glamorous, not exciting, but stable. I was the man who calculated risks for a living, who pinched pennies because I had no other choice. Most of my paycheck went to experimental treatments that insurance refused to cover for Marjorie. I took extra shifts, lived modestly, denied myself luxuries so she could have a few more months. But to my daughter Sylvia, that sacrifice was invisible. To her, I was just cheap old dad. She never knew why I said no to seaside vacations or fancy clothes. She only saw the refusals, never the reasons. And she grew up resenting me for it. That resentment hardened as she got older. She married Calvin, a man with a smile too polished and eyes too sharp, and together they built a life where appearances mattered more than truth. They had 2 children, Ethan and Lily, but I only saw them on holidays when Sylvia needed a babysitter or a favor. After Marjorie's funeral, Sylvia suggested I sell the house and move into a nursing home. "You'll be taken care of, Dad," she said. But I knew what she really meant. Sell the house, free up the money, make it easier for her to visit less. I refused. This house is all I have left of my life with Marjorie. So I stayed. Alone. Predictable. Forgotten. Until the day everything changed. It was a Tuesday senior discount day at the grocery store. I shuffled through the aisles with my list, checking off vegetables, bread, milk. At the checkout, my eyes caught a bright poster for the state lottery jackpot, $5 million. I had never wasted a dime on lotteries. But something strange pulled at me that morning. Maybe it was the memory of Marjorie buying a ticket every birthday, grinning as she said, "Imagine, Walter, we could see the whole world." Maybe it was fatigue from years of frugality. Or maybe it was time for a miracle. I handed the cashier a 20 and walked out with a ticket in my wallet. Then I forgot about it. Saturday night, I was in my recliner watching the weather forecast when the drawing came on. The numbers rolled out 27, 32, 11, 45. Each one matched the ticket in my hand. By the last number, I was gripping that little slip of paper so hard my knuckles went white. I had won. $5 million. I sat frozen, the room spinning around me. In all my years of working, saving, denying myself, I could never have dreamed of this. I thought of Marjorie. She would have laughed, kissed me, said, "See, Walter." Sometimes the universe surprises you. For the first time in years, I let myself imagine college funds for Ethan and Lily. A secure retirement where I didn't count pills or measure milk by expiration dates. Maybe even that dream Marjorie and I had once mapped out, travel oceans, sunsets in places we only saw in magazines. And then another thought came, one I couldn't shake. Maybe this was my chance to heal the rift with Sylvia. Maybe if I gave her what she had always wanted, She'd finally see me not as a miser, but as a father who loved her more than himself. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, hearing Marjorie's voice. Happiness isn't in money, Walter, it's in moments shared. And I thought maybe now I can buy us those moments back. The next morning, I ironed my old suit and walked into a travel agency downtown. Bright posters of turquoise seas and white sand lined the walls. My hand trembled as I pointed at one. I want to book a trip, I said to the young man behind the desk. For my family. Somewhere unforgettable. The young man behind the desk introduced himself as Darren Tate, Senior Travel Consultant. He looked barely old enough to shave, but his smile was confident. What kind of destination are you looking for, Mr. Grayson? I hesitated only for a moment. Beach. Somewhere my daughter has always dreamed about. White sand, blue water, no crowds. Darren tapped on his keyboard, the screen reflecting in his glasses. I know just the place. St. James Island, an exclusive Caribbean resort. Only one hotel on the island, 50 villas total, reached by private jet from St. Thomas. 3-bedroom villas each with a pool and ocean view. He spun the monitor toward me. Turquoise water. Palm trees bending low. Villas gleaming like pearls against the sand. I could almost see Sylvia and Calvin walking that beach, Ethan and Lily laughing in the surf. For a moment, I let myself believe it would heal the cracks between us. How much, I asked bluntly. Darren named a sum that would have made me choke in my old life. Instead, I nodded. Book it. 2 weeks in August. His eyebrows lifted, but he didn't question me. For the next 2 hours, he guided me through every detail: flights, transfers, spa packages, kids programs. I added them all. For once in my life, money wasn't the obstacle. When he handed me the folder with the Northern Lights logo, I felt like I was holding more than paper. I was holding a second chance. On the way home, I stopped at a stationery shop and bought a heavy cream-colored envelope. At my kitchen table, I slipped in the glossy brochures and wrote a letter in my own careful hand. Dear Sylvia and Calvin, I know I haven't always been the father you wanted. Work, worry, and circumstance stood in the way. But life is short, and time with loved ones is what matters most. I've arranged a trip for all of us 2 weeks on St. James Island. I hope this gift will give us memories to treasure and remind you how much you mean to me. Love, Dad. Grandpa. I folded the letter, slid it into the envelope, and sealed it with a shaking hand. Then I called Sylvia. Come for dinner Saturday. Bring Calvin. I'd like to see you. There was a pause on the line, as if she were surprised. Our visits were rare these days, and usually on her terms. But she agreed. 6 o'clock. For the rest of the week, I cleaned the house from top to bottom, polished the silver, even ordered a cake from the finest bakery in town. On Saturday, I roasted chicken with rosemary mashed potatoes, with buttergreen beans, with almonds. Sylvia's favorites from childhood. By 6 o'clock sharp, I was in my suit tie, knotted hands trembling slightly. The doorbell rang. Sylvia stood there radiant at 42 still, with that same bright smile she'd inherited from her mother. Calvin was beside her, tall and sharp, in an expensive suit, eyes scanning the room before he even stepped inside. Dad, you look wonderful, Sylvia said, kissing my cheek. And the suit, what's the occasion? I smiled. You'll see. At the table, the china and linen gleamed. We ate, and for a while it felt almost normal. Sylvia complimented the food. Calvin spoke about the bank. I asked about Ethan and Lily. They answered politely, but there was always that invisible wall. When dessert was finished, I cleared my throat and reached for the envelope I had tucked beneath my chair. My heart pounded as I placed it on the table. "What's this?" Sylvia asked, eyes wide. "Open it," I said, voice low but steady. She slid the letter out, unfolded it. Her eyes moved over the words, and slowly her mouth fell open. "St. James Island," she whispered. She looked at me, then at the glossy photos. "You're giving us this, all of us." "Yes," I said. "You, Calvin, the children, and me. 2 weeks. I've already booked and paid for everything." For a moment, her face lit up with something I hadn't seen in years, pure joy. She leapt up and wrapped her arms around me. "Oh, Dad, this is unbelievable." Thank you. Calvin leaned over the papers, eyes narrowing, calculating. Then he looked at me. "Mr. Grayson, that's very generous. But if you don't mind me asking, how exactly can you afford it?" Sylvia shot him a sharp glance, but the question didn't sting the way I thought it would. I was ready. "I won the lottery," I said simply. They both froze. "Lottery," Sylvia repeated, her voice rising. "And you didn't tell us. I wanted it to be a surprise. Besides, it's not about the money. It's about us being together." Calvin nodded slowly, but his eyes flickered with something I didn't like. He took a sip of coffee, pretending nonchalance. Sylvia laughed nervously and began flipping through the brochures again, chattering about villas and pools. But I saw at the silent look they exchanged across the table, sharp and knowing, as if they were already planning something I wasn't meant to see. And in that moment, a chill crept down my spine, even as Sylvia hugged me again and said, "This is the best gift you could ever give us." Before I go on, let me ask you something. Where are you watching this video from right now? Drop it in the comments below. I'd love to see how far my story travels. The morning of our departure, I woke before dawn. I couldn't sleep, not with the thought of palm trees and turquoise water waiting on the horizon. For the first time in years, I felt like a boy before prom, nervous, excited, almost giddy. I shaved, carefully put on my best shirt, and even dabbed a bit of cologne, the same bottle Sylvia had given me last Christmas, still nearly full. My suitcase stood ready by the door, packed days in advance, passport, travel documents, medication camera, even a wide-brimmed hat Marjorie once bought me for that trip we never took. By 8:30, I was seated in my armchair by the window jacket draped neatly over my suitcase. I checked my watch every 5 minutes, waiting for the familiar sound of Calvin's SUV pulling into the driveway. Sylvia had promised they'd arrive at 9 sharp. At 9:05, the driveway was still empty. I told myself not to worry, children can be slow to get ready. Maybe Ethan misplaced his shoes, or Lily needed her toy rabbit. Little delays, nothing serious. At 9:20, my phone rang. Sylvia's voice was tight, breathless. "Dad, we're running just a little late. The kids, well, Lily couldn't find her favorite toy. You know how she is. We'll be there soon, half an hour at most." I laughed softly. "Don't worry, sweetheart. We'll still make the flight." But when 9:30 rolled into 9:45 and then into 10, my stomach began to knot. Finally, the crunch of tires on gravel reached my ears. Relief washed over me until I looked out the window. Not Calvin's black SUV. A yellow cab. I opened the door before they could knock. Sylvia and Calvin stood there dressed for travel, sunglasses, perched lips stretched into forced smiles. But there were no children. No Ethan, no Lily. And behind them, the cab's engine idled impatiently. "Where are the kids?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Sylvia shifted her purse strap nervously. Oh, Dad. They're staying with a friend for now. We thought it best. My hand tightened on the doorknob. This trip was for all of us. Why aren't they here? Calvin cleared his throat. There's been a little issue with the villa. Turns out it only sleeps 4 comfortably, not 5. And with construction work nearby, it wouldn't really be suitable for you, Mr. Grayson. Too much noise, too much dust. I stared at him. Construction. That's not what the brochure said. Sylvia rushed in her words, spilling out too quickly. Dad, it's also the heat. The mosquitoes. You remember how badly you reacted last summer? We just don't want you to risk your health. You're 77, and her voice faltered when she saw my expression. A wave of disbelief, then anger, then something colder settled over me. They weren't late because of a missing toy. They'd been plotting, calculating, and I was standing there, suitcase-packed heart wide open, listening to the door of my own dreams slam shut. I forced myself to stay calm, but inside my chest, something cracked. You're telling me, after I spent nearly $30,000 on this vacation, I'm not going? Sylvia looked down, biting her lip. Calvin's eyes flickered sharp and restless. We'll reimburse you when we get back, he said. Reimburse. As if money was the point. As if what I wanted could be repaid with a check. Behind them, the cab driver tapped the wheel, impatient. Sylvia placed a hand on my arm, her voice sugar-coated but hollow. Don't be angry, Dad. We're doing this for your own good. Next time we'll all go together. I promise. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat closed around the words I wanted to hurl at them. They turned and walked back toward the cab, their bodies framed by the morning sun, leaving me in the doorway like a forgotten passenger. My suitcase stood beside me, useless, accusing. For a long moment, I stared at it. Then, with trembling hands, I reached for the phone on the wall. Darren Tate, Northern Lights Travel Agency, came the cheerful voice after 2 rings. I swallowed hard. Darren, this is Walter Grayson. I need to speak to you. Urgently. Mr. Grayson, Darren's voice came through the line, calm but curious. What's the matter? I gripped the receiver tighter. My daughter and her husband just left for the airport without me. They said the villa only had 4 beds. They said there was construction nearby. They said the hotel had agreed to let them check in without me. For a moment, silence hummed on the line. Then Darren spoke, his tone firm. That's impossible. I personally handled your booking. Your villa has 3 full bedrooms each with king-size beds. There is no construction on that side of the island. And most importantly, hotel policy is strict. Without you, the primary reservation holder, no one can check in. Not even family. I closed my eyes. Relief and fury collided inside me. So it was all lies. Every word Sylvia and Calvin had spoken. Lies to cut me out of the very gift I had bought. Mr. Grayson, Darren continued gently. You still want to take this trip, don't you? Yes, I said, my voice low, steady. More than ever. Then listen carefully. Your daughter and son-in-law are booked on a connecting flight through Miami. That gives you an advantage. There's a direct flight to St. Thomas leaving Minneapolis at 2 o'clock this afternoon. If you leave right now, you'll actually reach the island before them. I glanced at the clock on the wall, 10:15. My heart thudded like a war drum. Could I really do this, alone at 77? Darren seemed to sense my hesitation. You've already paid for this trip, Mr. Grayson. It's in your name. You deserve to enjoy it. I'll book the ticket right now and send you the confirmation. All you need is your passport, your documents, and your courage. My courage. I looked at the suitcase by the door, still packed and ready as if it had been waiting for me to decide whether I was a man or a ghost. I'll go, I said finally. The words felt like fire leaving my throat. Book me that flight. Within minutes, an email arrived. I printed the boarding pass, slid it into my folder with the travel papers, and locked the house behind me. My hands trembled as I called for a cab, but it wasn't fear, it was adrenaline. 10 minutes later, a young driver with tattoos on his arms pulled up. Airport, he asked. Yes. And step on it, I replied. My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded younger, hungrier, alive. As the cab sped down the highway, I caught my reflection in the window. The lines on my face, the thinning hair, the old man's skin, all still there. But my eyes, they burned. For the first time in decades, I was doing something for myself. Not for Marjorie's treatments, not for Sylvia's bills, not for Calvin's ambitions. For me. The driver grinned in the rearview mirror. Vacation, huh? I looked out at the horizon, the late summer sky, wide and blue. Yeah, I said, a vacation. And maybe a new beginning. By the time the airport came into view, the tight knot in my chest had loosened. The betrayal still stung, but beneath it was something stronger, steadier resolve. Sylvia and Calvin thought they had written me out of my own story. But I was about to turn the page. The cab screeched to a stop at the Minneapolis airport at 12:45. My flight left at 2. I paid the driver, thanked him with a handshake, and wheeled my suitcase through the glass doors, my heart racing like it hadn't in years. Check-in security boarding pass, all a blur. I moved faster than I thought my legs could carry me, as if every step was fueled by a lifetime of swallowed words and wasted sacrifices. At the gate, I collapsed into a chair, sweat dampening my shirt. Around me, young couples scrolled through their phones, business travelers typed furiously on laptops, children tugged at their parents' hands. I sat with my folder in my lap, gripping it like armor. Inside were my passport, my reservation, my proof that I still existed in this world as more than a wallet or a burden. When they called for boarding, I stood tall. My knees ached, but I didn't care. As the plane lifted off the ground, I pressed my hand to the armrest. Takeoff had always unsettled me. Marjorie used to laugh and squeeze my hand. You've driven through blizzards, Walter, and you're afraid of a little turbulence, she'd tease. Now the seat beside me was empty except for a middle-aged woman absorbed in her magazine. I ordered tomato juice, my ritual, Marjorie's old joke about it tasting better at altitude echoing in my mind. The sky stretched wide and endless beyond the window, and with it came memories. Sylvia at 10 years old, her pigtails bouncing as she tugged me toward the lake with her fishing rod. Come on, Daddy, we'll catch the biggest one, she'd shout. We never caught much, but we laughed. She had been patient, bright-eyed, full of hope. When did she stop looking at me with those eyes? Was it the day I said no to a school trip because the money was already swallowed by medical bills? Was it when she realized other kids' parents gave them more clothes, more vacations, more freedom? Or was it when Calvin entered her life all ambition and polish, convincing her that I was nothing but an old miser standing in the way? The plane jolted slightly, a ripple of turbulence. I clenched my teeth, but inside another storm brewed. Rage, yes, but deeper than that grief. Grief for the little girl who used to press her drawings into my hands, proud as if she'd painted the Mona Lisa. Grief for the woman she'd become, eyes darting with calculation, her smile no longer warm but practiced. I tightened my grip on the armrest. No more illusions, Walter. Not this time. 3 hours later, the plane began its descent into St. Thomas. Below me, emerald islands dotted the turquoise sea like jewels scattered on velvet. The sight should have filled me with awe. Instead, I felt a pulse of determination. I was here first. For once in my life, I had beaten Sylvia and Calvin at their own game. While they waited out their layover in Miami thinking they'd left me behind, I was already on the doorstep of paradise. And when they arrived, faces smug and expectant, I'd be there, waiting. As the wheels touched down, a strange calm settled over me. I wasn't just flying to an island. I was flying toward a reckoning. When the plane door opened, humid air rolled in heavy with salt and hibiscus. I stepped down onto the tarmac, my legs shaky but firm. A man in a crisp white shirt stood near the terminal exit, holding a placard, Mr. Grayson. I walked toward him, my suitcase rattling behind me. "Good afternoon, sir. I'm Joseph from Paradise Cove Resort. Welcome to St. Thomas. Your private transfer to St. James is waiting." The words washed over me like a benediction. For a moment I almost laughed. They thought they'd cut me out. And here I am, being greeted like a king. Joseph guided me through the small terminal to a sleek van. Palm trees flicked past the windows as we drove to a private pier. A twin-engine plane waited gleaming in the late sun. There were only a handful of passengers, two newlywed couples giddy and whispering. Their laughter hurt a little, reminding me of what Marjorie and I never got to do. But today wasn't about regret. It was about reclaiming what was mine. The hop to St. James took only half an hour. From the air, the island looked unreal, white ribbons of beach-green hills stitched with jungle, the water glowing like liquid glass. When we landed, hotel staff welcomed us with cool towels and fruit drinks. Mr. Grayson, a tall man in a spotless white suit, stepped forward, extending a hand. His hair was silver, his voice steady. Richard Pratt, general manager. Darren Tate briefed me on your situation. May I say you handled it with admirable composure. Composure, I chuckled bitterly. I felt anything but. Pratt's eyes softened. Betrayal always cuts deep, especially when it comes from family. But rest assured, you are our primary guest. The villa is yours alone unless you choose otherwise. His words struck something raw. Unless I choose otherwise. For once, I had the choice. We walked through lush gardens to his office overlooking the sea. He poured me tea, then leaned forward. Your daughter and son-in-law are due tomorrow morning. If you prefer, I can have security present when they arrive, or even the local police to make the situation absolutely clear. I hesitated. Police not to arrest unless you request it, Pratt said gently. But to stand as witnesses, it sends a message. This is not just personal drama, it's legal territory. They cannot override your rights. I stared out at the horizon. The sun was dropping, staining the ocean pink and gold. For years, Sylvia and Calvin had dictated the terms of our relationship, when I was useful, when I was invisible. Now the tables were turning. Yes, I said finally. Have the police there. I want them to see that I'm not the weak old man they think I am. Pratt nodded once firmly. Consider it done. Captain Rivera will be at the dock when they arrive. He rose, and together We walked the sandy path to my villa. When the door swung open, I gasped. Spacious rooms, elegant furniture, glass doors opening to a terrace with its own pool and direct access to the beach. 3 full bedrooms each with a king bed. No bunk beds. No construction noise. Just the hush of waves and the rustle of palms. Everything exactly as promised, Pratt said. I ran my hand along the polished wood of the terrace railing. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged somewhere not as a guest in my daughter's life, but as the rightful owner of my own story. That night I ate dinner on the terrace, grilled fish, fresh fruit, a glass of crisp white wine. The stars blazed above, brighter than any back home. The waves whispered against the shore, carrying Marjorie's memory. "You should have been here with me," I murmured into the night. But even as grief pressed against my chest, a new fire lit within me. Tomorrow Sylvia and Calvin would step off that boat expecting a villa they thought they'd stolen. Instead, they would find me waiting unbroken and no longer silent. At dawn, the sea was glass. I stood barefoot on the terrace of my villa, watching the horizon glow orange as the sun climbed. Today was the day. The day my daughter would learn I wasn't a man to be hidden away, pitied, or erased. Breakfast waited untouched on the table, fresh fruit and omelet coffee, but I couldn't swallow a bite. My stomach churned with nerves and resolve in equal measure. At 9:30 sharp, the phone rang. It was Mr. Pratt. "They'll arrive within the hour, Mr. Grayson. Captain Rivera and his officer are already at the dock. Shall I escort you?" "Yes," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. By the time I reached the hotel's main entrance, Pratt was waiting flanked by 2 uniformed policemen. Rivera, a tall man with silver streaks in his hair, clasped my hand firmly. "You've been wronged, Mr. Grayson. Today you'll have the truth on your side. We'll ensure everything remains civil but clear." We walked down the winding path through hibiscus and palms until the dock came into view. Staff members stood ready with flower garlands and cocktails, smiling for the arriving guests. Pratt gestured for us to stand a little apart, half hidden by the tropical greenery. Soon, a white ferry cut across the water, its wake foaming bright against the turquoise sea. My heart thumped like a drum in my chest. I could already make out Sylvia's sun hat, wide-brimmed and jaunty, and Calvin's tall frame beside her. They looked carefree, even smug, laughing as if the island belonged to them. The ferry moored, and passengers spilled onto the dock, greeted with leis and drinks. Sylvia and Calvin stepped forward confidently, their luggage wheeled by a porter. They approached the front desk, set up for check-in. Calvin handed over documents with a practiced smile, but then I saw it the change. The receptionist frowned, spoke softly, and shook her head. Calvin's smile faltered. He gestured louder this time, jabbing a finger at the papers. Sylvia's hand fluttered to her chest, her expression wobbling between confusion and panic. That was my cue. Pratt nodded at me. Now. I stepped out from behind the palms, my sandals scraping against the planks. The policemen followed close, their presence quiet but undeniable. Sylvia saw me first. Her eyes widened, her mouth falling open. She nudged Calvin, who spun around. His face drained of color, then flushed with heat. "Dad," Sylvia stammered. "What, how? Hello, Sylvia," I said, my voice steady, low enough to sting. "Hello, Calvin." I took the direct flight. "Arrived yesterday." Calvin's jaw tightened. "Mr. Grayson." We thought you weren't supposed to. I cut him off. I wasn't supposed to. What, show up for the vacation I paid for, claim the villa in my name, enjoy the gift I bought for my family. The dock went still. Staff members exchanged glances. Even the other guests seemed to pause, sensing drama unraveling in paradise. Rivera stepped forward, his tone calm but firm. For the record, the reservation is under Mr. Walter Grayson. Any attempt to use it without his consent is considered invalid, even fraudulent. He has full authority to decide whether you remain here. Sylvia's eyes brimmed with tears. Dad, please, we were only worried about you. The heat, the mosquitoes, your health. Enough, I said, my voice sharp. No more lies about bunk beds or construction sites. No more excuses. You didn't forget me, you excluded me. And now here we are. Calvin's lips pressed into a thin line. So what now? You embarrass your own daughter in front of strangers. That's your victory. I stared at him, the dock swaying slightly under my feet, the sea glittering all around us. No, Calvin. My victory is standing here at all. My victory is finally being seen. For a moment, all I heard was the rush of the sea against the pilings. The air was heavy charged, like the moment before a storm. Sylvia stood frozen, her sunglasses slipping down her nose, tears streaking her cheeks. Calvin, ever the banker, tried to recover his composure, but his voice cracked with a brittle edge. Mr. Grayson, he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. This is a misunderstanding. You weren't meant to feel left out. We only wanted what was best. I cut him off. Don't insult me with that phrase again. You left me at home, suitcase packed by the door, and drove off in a cab like thieves in the night. That's not care. That's betrayal. Sylvia sobbed softly. Daddy, please. We thought you'd be uncomfortable. You thought wrong, I snapped. You thought I would sit quietly in that empty house while you lived my dream. You misjudged me. Captain Rivera cleared his throat, stepping forward. Legally speaking, Mr. Grayson controls this reservation. No one else can check in without his consent. If he refuses, you'll have to secure accommodations elsewhere or return to the mainland. Calvin's face drained. That's absurd. Do you know what the prices are on this island? We can't. I leaned closer, my voice low steel beneath the calm. For years, I've heard what you can't do. You can't visit unless you need babysitting. You can't call unless you need money. You can't treat me with respect unless I'm writing checks. But you could scheme to cut me out of my own gift. Sylvia reached for my hand, her voice breaking. Dad, we're sorry. Truly, don't make us leave. The children were so excited. I raised an eyebrow. Where are they now? You promised they'd be with us. Instead, you left them behind, because this trip was never about family. It was about luxury for you. Her shoulders slumped, the truth hanging in the air. Calvin's jaw worked furiously, but he stayed silent, calculating the odds and finding none in his favor. I drew a breath, steady and final. You have two choices. Board the boat back to St. Thomas and fly home, or find your own hotel here at your own expense. But you will not set foot in my villa. Not this time. Not ever again without my permission. Sylvia gasped, her face twisting with shock. Dad, you'd really turn your own daughter away. The words burned, but I didn't flinch. I'm not turning you away, Sylvia. You turned yourself away the moment you tried to erase me. A hush fell over the dock. Even the waves seemed to quiet, waiting for her response. She broke down, sobbing into her hands. Calvin muttered under his breath. Unbelievable, but his bravado had melted. He knew the fight was lost. Mr. Pratt stepped in smoothly, his voice professional. We can arrange transport back to St. Thomas within the hour. Or if you prefer, I can contact one of the smaller guest houses on the north side of the island. Their rates are considerably higher, but it is an option. Calvin's face twisted. We'll leave. His arm wrapped around Sylvia's shoulders, guiding her away like a defeated general retreating from a battlefield. She looked back once, her eyes meeting mine, grief, anger, and something else. Recognition, perhaps, that the father she had dismissed was no longer invisible. As they walked toward the waiting boat, Rivera turned to me. Would you like to press charges for attempted fraud, Mr. Grayson? I shook my head. No. Let their shame be punishment enough. I don't want my name tied to police reports and courtrooms. I just want my peace. Rivera nodded, respect in his eyes. Then you have it. I stood there until the boat pushed off, shrinking into the horizon. My chest felt both heavy and strangely light. Heavy with the knowledge that I might never again see my daughter the same way. Light with the realization that for once I had not allowed myself to be erased. When I turned back toward the hotel, Mr. Pratt placed a hand on my shoulder. Come, Mr. Grayson. Paradise awaits. You've earned it. And for the first time in decades, I believed him. That afternoon, after the boat carried Sylvia and Calvin back across the turquoise channel, I walked the length of the beach alone. My footprints trailed behind me like a confession written in the sand. For the first time in years, I didn't have to hurry, didn't have to explain, didn't have to justify myself to anyone. The waves rolled in gentle and steady, erasing each mark I left. I realized then how much of my life had been spent like those footprints, wiped away by the needs of others. Marjorie's illness, Sylvia's expectations, Calvin's greed. I had poured myself out until there was almost nothing left. But not anymore. When I returned to the villa, Thomas, my butler, greeted me with a smile. Rough morning, Mr. Grayson, I chuckled, surprising myself. You could say that. But I think it was necessary. He inclined his head respectfully. Sometimes storms clear the air. I took lunch on the terrace, grilled snapper mango salad, a glass of white wine chilled just right. The food tasted different now, sharper, brighter. Maybe it wasn't the seasoning. Maybe it was me. In the afternoon, I wandered through the resort grounds. Lush gardens hummed with cicadas, bright orchids spilled color along the paths, and the scent of frangipani followed me like a blessing. Couples lounged by the pool, families laughed on the beach. Yet I didn't feel out of place. Not anymore. I wasn't an afterthought or a tag-along. I was here on my own terms. By sunset, I found myself back on the terrace. The horizon burned in shades of orange and crimson. I raised my glass to the sky. This one's for you, Marjorie, I whispered. We didn't make it here together, but I'm carrying us both. As darkness fell, I realized something had shifted inside me. The anger that had churned for so long was fading, replaced by something sturdier, clarity. I had wasted too many years waiting for my daughter's approval, her gratitude, her love in the shape I wanted. That wait was over. After dinner, I sat by the pool, watching stars scatter across the black velvet sky. The stillness wrapped around me like an embrace. For once I wasn't lonely. I was simply alone, and that was different. Alone could mean freedom. Alone could mean dignity. Alone could mean finally living without apology. And as the night deepened, I felt it a stirring I hadn't known in years. Hope. Not the fragile, desperate hope of being included or remembered, but a stronger kind, the hope of beginning again, even at 77. The next morning, I woke to birdsong and sunlight spilling through the curtains. For once, I didn't dread the day ahead. I stretched slowly, savoring the quiet, then dressed in light linen and stepped onto the terrace. The sea stretched out like a promise. At breakfast, Thomas surprised me with a question. "Mr. Grayson, would you like me to reserve you a spot on today's snorkeling trip? The reefs here are among the most beautiful in the Caribbean." A week ago, I might have laughed and said not at my age, but instead I found myself nodding. "Yes, Thomas. Sign me up." By noon, I was bobbing gently in the warm water mask, snug on my face fins, pushing me along. Beneath me, a kaleidoscope of life unfolded, schools of bright fish darting among corals, shafts of sunlight rippling across the seabed. I floated weightless, tears stinging my eyes behind the goggles. I wasn't just seeing a reef. I was seeing proof that life still had color, still had depth even after loss and betrayal. Back on the boat, a couple about my age struck up a conversation. Margaret and Henry from Vermont celebrating their 40th anniversary. We talked about family travel and the odd freedom that comes with growing older. Before we docked, Margaret touched my arm. "You have kind eyes, Walter. It's never too late to start again, you know." That night, I joined them for dinner in the main restaurant. Laughter, good wine, the murmur of conversation, things I had forgotten could still belong to me. I didn't need Sylvia or Calvin at my table to feel whole. In fact, I realized I was better off without their shadows dimming my light. Days slipped into a rhythm. Morning walks along the beach. Afternoons exploring the island with new friends. Evenings watching sunsets that looked like brush strokes from heaven. Each day felt like a page rewritten not of the life I had lost, but of the one I was claiming now. One evening, as I sat on the terrace with a journal in hand, I thought about Sylvia. I didn't hate her. I pitied her, trapped in the web she and Calvin had spun, blind to what really mattered. I wished her well, but I no longer waited for her approval. For the first time, I was free of that chain. And maybe that's the real gift I won in the lottery, not just money, not just a ticket to paradise, but the chance to stop begging for love where it wasn't freely given. As my final day on the island drew near, I stood by the water's edge at sunset. The waves lapped at my feet, warm and gentle. I looked out at the horizon and felt no fear of the years ahead. I lifted my head, speaking as if Marjorie and the whole world could hear me. I'm 77 years old. I've been called stingy, invisible, a burden. But here I stand, alive, whole, and unashamed. I've earned the right to live on my terms. And so have you, wherever you are. Then I turned back toward the villa, the sand cool beneath my feet, and I smiled. Because the truth was, simple dignity isn't something given, it's something claimed. And I had claimed mine at last. You know, friends, telling this story reminded me of something simple but powerful. Dignity is not handed to us by others. It's something we must claim for ourselves, no matter our age. Walter's journey is one of those life stories that proves it's never too late to stand up, to draw a line, and to start again. If you've ever felt overlooked, dismissed, or taken for granted, I hope this story gave you strength. Remember, your voice matters, your presence matters, and your life is still yours to live fully. Here on Brian's Story, we share true life stories that reveal both the heartbreak and the rebirth that come with family betrayal and resilience. If this story touched you, please subscribe to the channel, share this video with someone who might need it, and leave a comment with your own thoughts or experiences. Because sometimes the most powerful stories are not just told, they're shared, and they remind us we are not alone.